So just a couple of protocols. You know, if you wouldn't mind putting your on mute, your screen on mute, and you can ask questions in the chat, and Sarah will be facilitating the panel discussion, and she'll be monitoring the chat and asking questions. So I'll just start off. Well, hello, I'm Rob Field. I'm the Director for UNE Sydney, and our co-host today is Sarah Morgan, and she's on the Parramatta Chamber Board as well. Sarah runs her business as an executive leadership facilitator and is a specialist in boosting team performance and organisational productivity through their culture teams and leaders. I'd like to welcome members from the Taree Business Chamber, the Tamworth Business Chamber, Armidale Business Chamber, Parramatta Chamber of Commerce, and my colleagues at UNE, and also our great speakers that we've got today. Such a fantastic group. I'd like to acknowledge the Parramatta Federal Member, Julie Owens. Julie is our member, Julie is a member of the Education Employment House Committee and the Corporations and Financial Services Joint Standing Committee, and is the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary for Small Business and Early Childhood. And Julie also was a small business owner. Sorry, I just got a bit of a cough, bit of a lurgy there, but definitely not COVID. I'd like to acknowledge acknowledgement of country, appreciating that we're connecting virtually. This means we are on the different traditional country of many groups. For those of you attending today in Parramatta and Sydney, we acknowledge the Darug people and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, which extends from the Sydney coastline to the foothills of the Blue Mountains. I would also like to extend the respect to anyone on the call today who is Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and to elders past, present and emerging. Cultural identities are extremely important for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They represent different heritages, languages, cultural practices, spiritual beliefs and geographic areas. The University of New England values and respects Indigenous knowledge systems as a vital part of the knowledge capital of Australia. Before I introduce the first guest speaker today, I feel I need to give a language classification warning, because you may be shocked awake with some of the words that you'll hear today, or more likely ponder the context. So I'm giving this an S classification, and S is for starter. You'll hear words in many ways you never thought possible. So let me use a couple of them now to soften the blow for you. Incubator, accelerator, bleeding edge, burn rate, cliff, deck, freemium, lean startup, founder, hockey stick, growth hacking, ramen profitable, vaporware and traction, just to throw a few out to you. My goodness, what a strange group of words. So ponder those while you hear the speakers today, and maybe that will help generate some questions for our panel. Our first speaker today is Edwina Sharrock. So Edwina is a registered nurse, midwife and founder of Birthbeat, an online childbirth education platform that is changing the way that parents prepare for birth and beyond. Empowering women to have their best birth, Edwina is on a mission to better the birthing experience of all Australians. Edwina was named one of the Australian Financial Review's top 100 women of influence in 2018 and was a state finalist for the innovation at the 2018 New South Wales Business Chamber Awards. So welcome, Edwina. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you, everyone. I know it is very early in the morning. I am actually coming to you from Gomeroi country, so in northwest New South Wales, and I actually have a very convenient map behind me. So I'm from Tamworth, and when Rob said he was going to do a language warning, my husband always says, obviously registered midwife, and he said, you should give a language warning before you launch into your education, because he believes I need to give a language warning for things like vagina, perineum, expressing breast milk. So that's probably going to shock you all more awake than all of our startup terms. Anyway, yes, so I'm a registered midwife, and thank you so much for having me on here, because I don't feel like often I've done something particularly outside of the box. And then when I start to talk, so we had a little chat before, and I said, what do you think everybody will benefit the most hearing? And really it was just about essentially what my business story has been. So I am, or was, so far from what I thought a business person looks like. I've been 20 years in public health. I'm a registered nurse and I'm an emergency clinical nurse consultant and worked for the Westpac Retrieval Service out here in Northwest New South Wales. And we were talking this morning again about innovation and what that looks like. And I think it's such a, it's a very commonly used word now in this world that I live in. And really, it was just about looking at something and a service that was being provided in my local area that wasn't good enough and thinking about how can we do it better. And that is essentially my business story. So I was running the local maternity unit. We have 1,000 births a year. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, Polly, so I was 38 weeks pregnant, about 25 kilos heavier than what I am now. And our local private hospital closed its maternity unit with no community consultation. It was a Ramsay hospital and they did really good childbirth education classes. Even though I had chose to birth at the public hospital, I thought that that was a sad thing for our community. And essentially I complained about it for a while and birthed Polly, had a great birth experience. But after it, I still felt very disappointed for our community. And if you haven't yet picked up, I'm an extreme extrovert. My husband is an extreme introvert, but he's the very analytical thinker. And he said, you're not benefiting anyone just complaining about this. Why don't you do something about it? And that was essentially how teaching prenatal classes in our living room started. We just thought that there has to be some other way to offer options for childbirth education in our community. And that grew very organically, again, a very common word in this startup space. And essentially fast track a couple of years, we grew out of our living room very quickly. Remember, extrovert, introvert, husband did not appreciate strangers, pregnant strangers coming into our living room most weekends to have their classes. And we then rented a little space, and it was about, I think I was about 4 years into teaching face-to-face when my husband said, you're working full-time. We had a 2 and a 4-year-old at that stage. We'd had another son, Theo. And he said, does BirthBeat make you any money? And this was probably my first dipping my toe into the business world. And I said, and it really scared me. I was like, I don't even know how to work out if BirthBeat makes me any money. I just love doing it. And he said, well, you need to do a P&L. And I remember going into the office that night, he works away, and Googling what is a P&L. So when I said I'm not a business person, if I now say that to you, I hope I have legitimized that I really wasn't a business person. And I was so excited. I rang him and I said, BirthBeat has made $2,000 this year. And I was so excited. And he said, what have you put in the wages column? And I hadn't put anything. So I realized that I had been working hours and hours in this business that I adored, but it was not a sustainable business model. So that was my first, okay, well, how do I now create a sustainable business model? So a lot of Google and a lot of YouTube. And I don't think that that is the way I should be encouraging other businesses, but that is my lived experience. And then we entered what was called the Commonwealth Bank Innovation Award. And I had this idea that why couldn't prenatal classes be taught online with a focus for rural, regional and remote women. And I really delved into adult learning and how can you do it online and how can you make it a really enjoyable, interactive experience. And we won the federal, we won the national competition. So CommBank, I still remember when they rang me and said, anyway, we'll get off the phone so that you can share it with your team. And it was 11 o'clock in the morning and I was in my pajamas in my home office. And I was like, I don't have a team, but I may have alluded to the fact that I had a team in the application. So I had to come clean with CommBank that it was just me, working from home mum. And that then led into me joining a tech accelerator. So I joined the HCF Catalyst program down at Tankstream Labs at the Sydney Startup Hub. So moved to Sydney for 3 months. At that stage, my children were 4 and 6. So I was really grateful to have the support of an amazing family because that's, nearly 500 kilometres away. And I was in Sydney Monday to Friday. And I remember on one of my first weeks at the Sydney Startup Hub, I dress very femininely and one of the guys pulled me aside and he said, you know, you could try jeans and a cap and just see if you can fit in a little more. And that's like red rag to a bull to me. So the dresses got prettier and flowier, and the pink lipstick was put on before every meeting to prove that we actually need to challenge ourselves as business owners, and we need to challenge ourselves in this startup world. And it's about this mindset and gender bias, and like my mind just started exploding, and it was such an incredible opportunity. However, it was pretty lonely. And what I was so fortunate to experience was then coming out of that 3 months in Sydney and being able to come home and be part of the SRI. So I am one of the founding members of the Smart Regional Incubator here in Tamworth, connected to the University of New England, hence Rob and Lou, and I am forever grateful for that experience. We are growing and scaling. We have grown 562% during the last 3 months through COVID, which is not surprising in that what we do is teach online classes. And I think I said, you know, good luck trying to shut me up because I love talking about this. So I'm just waiting for Sarah to give me that little tea in a minute. So I'm trying to get it all in really quickly. But when we talk about innovation, we talk about pivoting. And I think one of my things that I want to share, if nothing else, with my journey is that you don't have to know what you're doing. But what you do have to do is surround yourself with a community that is going to support you to go on that journey. And that's what the SRI has really been for me. From sharing bookkeepers or accountants or, you know, hey, how do you navigate this? Or there's this great grant application, I'll help you with it. That's the day-to-day stuff. But then also letting yourself believe that you can be an innovator and really changing that mindset and having that growth mindset around, oh no, like I used to say, oh no, I'm not a business person, I'm just a midwife. And I'm really conscious of my language now and saying, you know, how I'm going to help other people. It was just that I saw something that was a little bit broke or that could be done better, and we can all be doing that. One of our biggest probably moments of innovation during the last few months, and I was sharing this earlier with the team, was around the Mater Hospital, who we had pitched to the Mater Hospital to do online childbirth education about 18 months ago. They do 2,500 births a year on the North Shore, and a very reputable, highly regarded hospital. And they said, oh, look, you know, we really don't see online service delivery for antenatal classes, you know, being the optimal way or taking off. And I've had these emails for years. And then all of a sudden, everybody came to me going, hey, you do online classes, don't you? This is the only option we've got. So I think now, in a way, COVID's provided this incredible opportunity for online health to say, well, there are other ways to do it and we can innovate it. So we met with the Mater online. I didn't have to leave Tamworth, and we actually rebuilt our whole portal, Mater branded, with Mater content, with what they wanted from their obstetricians and midwives within 48 hours, and started delivering the service within 48 hours. So we've had over 240 Mater parents go through the Birth Beat program during COVID. And it's just been a beautiful partnership where it's just win-win for everyone. So
thanks.
As I said, thanks, Sarah. I was going to say, there's so much that I love to share about this journey, but and
there's still opportunity. So make sure everybody that's taken some notes and really wanting to hear more, there's an opportunity towards the end of our presentation today to ask more of a joiner. But thank you very much, Robert.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Edwina. That was great. Good to hear. Great success story. So I'd now like to introduce Dr. Lou Conway. So Lou is the director for UNE Smart Region Incubator, which supports startup businesses across New England Northwest region. Lou has led the development of the SRI since it began in March 2017 and is passionate about supporting startups in agriculture, health and other sectors to solve the problem for the global marketplace. Lou has worked in various roles within agribusiness, education and human service delivery, and her research reflects the diversity of background. Lou's pursued a keen interest in regional development through her research and seeks collaborations with people to capture the benefit of innovation and technology in our region. So over to you, Lou.
Oh, gosh, thank you, Rob. I'm sorry you had to read out such a long screed. But really, I'd have to say this is one of the most exciting jobs I think I've ever had. And as you can see, with somebody like Edwina as a founder in our incubator, you're working with this incredible passion, this absolute capacity to deliver and solve problems in our own communities. And I think that's really exciting. Just to give absolute credit where credit is due, the incubator supports around the university sector were an initiative of the New South Wales government. So just the Boost Business Innovation Program began in 2016, 2017. And without that government support, we wouldn't be here today. So I just want to give full credit, because what that has actually enabled us is to build a network of incubators across New South Wales. So every university has a service like what we provide with the SRI. And I work really closely with Don Wright at Western Sydney Uni as well, who I think is doing an awesome job innovating through adversity, I think is their tagline at the moment. So it is absolutely the collaboration across all of New South Wales. So our mantra is founders choose. So we will sometimes work with founders out of Wollongong or Newcastle, or working with UNSW. And the idea is that wherever that founder might be, if we can help to land a new company in New South Wales, then we are actually all achieving a great outcome. So, but what's lovely about having incubators all across New South Wales is we're all in innovation districts or precincts, whatever that language might be as well. But fundamentally, they're our places, our homes. And as Edwina said, by actually solving a problem in your own community, knowing our place. So we say our opportunity is around agriculture, health, environmental services. If you can solve a problem in your own community that has capacity to scale to a bigger market, then that's what we're here to help to do. There are just sort of 4 points I just want to touch on, because I think it'll be also coming back to the richness of the conversation and the questions. But I think what the research shows really clearly is that when people belong to a community, so really effectively an incubator is forming a community of founders, they are much more likely to succeed. So often people will point to the success rate of startups. But if you actually belong to a community, the success rate goes from something like 5 to 10% to 70 to 80%. And I think that's what you've got in the Chamber of Commerce as well. You know, the networks that we belong to make a huge difference in the outcomes. So I guess one other word I wanted to add, Rob, is something that we play with, which is called joined-upness. You know, like, let's actually look at who we join up with within our places and within our expert networks. And then how do we actually form that community that does that kind of give and take? So I just wanted to leave that point. Another thing is actually to be research rich. So one of the things Edwina probably in that amazing story of success, but she is a really research rich startup. You know, she's accessing the best knowledge available in the sector through her professional networks. And so one of the things I think, you know, in our universities, we've got fantastic researchers working on problems, but it's great to have ways of actually asking them, you know, what are the problems you're solving? How can we as business people help people who are in that research space to pull that research out and turn it into commercial or community impact? And Emily would be a great person to talk about that shortly, because her background has been in that space. So looking for business, whatever that business might be, to be research rich, because researchers are really great at digging down and analysing, but turning it into a business opportunity is sometimes not their comfortable space, but they're often looking for partnerships. So I guess that's a great way to help them achieve impact. The next point I just want to make is about choosing optimism, because one of the things I really noticed when I started working in the incubator, it was just like 6 months in, saying, this is just, I actually felt this incredible positive surge. You're working with people who are really trying to bring to market an innovation, something new, a new way of doing it. They're collaborating. And I think there's something about what we do have to do. And right now it's incredibly tough. but is to choose optimism, you know. And we had the great pleasure of working with Australia's chief optimist, whose name is Victor Purton, who's based in Victoria. And can I just do a little plug that if the Chamber of Commerce would like to invite Victor Purton to come and do a session with you about what makes you optimistic. So he's this amazing man who's worked as a trade commissioner in the US and as a Liberal politician in Victoria, but he's actually worked out that what we all need is to kind of tap into this wellspring of optimism as well. So I guess I just wanted to put a bit of a plug for that. And then just finally, I think what we're all doing is really needing to invest, I think, in the next generation. So, you know, right now, all the statistics are kind of showing to us that people under 30 are going to be heavily impacted by COVID. In fact, there have been some trends, you know, Productivity Commission report shows that for under 30-year-olds, they've actually been doing it quite tough, you know, financially, economically. And so one of the things that we're delivering at the moment with Remy, who's on this call, we actually have 6 young people from Parramatta who have joined a Steps to Grow program. So you're working with people from 15 to 25 who've got an idea and they want to bring it to market. And what's really interesting is that the under 18-year-olds are working on new products that they'd like to bring into the market. The 18 to 25-year-olds are working on service solutions. And that probably reflects, you know, who's tapping into the service sector at the moment. But they are absolutely full of ideas of new ways of doing things they'd like to improve. So I think it's just and while we are all under the pump, just looking for those opportunities to sponsor somebody, to inspire somebody. And can I just do a little call out here? Because one of the things Edwina didn't mention is that when she had an opportunity to bring in somebody to her team, Edwina chose a young 16-year-old Aboriginal woman who has now stayed with her and has just become trainee of the year in our region. And the other part of that is that I've heard this amazing young woman, Michaela, talk about how working with Edwina has inspired her to think about her own startup. And, you know, that's how we make an impact as well. So just what we're trying to do, and I guess we all imagine this, that how could we build a gigafactory, I call it, of talent across our communities. And for us, it's that map behind Edwina. You know, it's the New England Northwest region, which is an inland space. And for you, I know in Parramatta, I love the times I've been with Rob in Church Street, to working with Remy, with this young group of people in school still within the Catholic education system. The talent is just enormous. And so they're going to be thinking about their future, and they're kind of feeling that their career trajectory is a bit shifted at the moment. So I think that's something that for an incubator, we are absolutely looking at how do we build those pathways for people to see a future, not just as an employee of somebody else, but also in developing their own enterprise. So I might leave it there, Sarah, just as a, just as a bit of an intro. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Thanks, Lou. Robert?
Hey, thanks, Lou. That was great and really good to hear, you know, the diverse range of activities and geographically as well. So great. I'd now like to introduce Emily Chang. Emily's with the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship, and those of you who don't know, the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship was set up, and all of the universities and TAFE are all collaborators and members of that organisation. And Emily is the director there of entrepreneurship, and Emily is an innovation coach and a design thinking facilitator who's worked with over 100 emerging entrepreneurs and publicly funded research teams across Australia, supporting their market discovery and their commercialisation process over the past 4 years. So over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Rob. Hey, everyone. Good morning. Great to be here. And yeah, I think building on from amazing story from Edwina and Lou, it really sort of lights a fire in my belly around why we're doing what we're doing. It's these sort of people that we get to work with, and these stories that we get to hear. So my experience is actually sort of on both sides. So I actually work in the area of supporting innovators, budding entrepreneurs, or serial entrepreneurs to provide them with the support, the community, the capability development to enable them to continue to grow and learn. So there's kind of that part, which is really where Sydney School of Entrepreneurship, or SSE, comes in. I also wear a different hat, which is a small business owner. So I left CSIRO at the end of last year, and fantastic timing. I don't know if it's worse or best timing. Started 2 small businesses in the last 6 months. So very, very kind of happy to share a little bit about what that sort of experience and journey has been. And the extra sort of bit of it is these 2 businesses are in the higher education sector. So if you're imagining sort of somebody who wants to start a business, probably higher ed is not the top of the list when it comes to a market that you want to go and build a business in. But yeah, talking a little bit about sort of the experience that I've had through SSE, it really is a wonderful way for me to see what the next generation of emerging entrepreneurs is looking at. So in the last 6 months, we've seen a tremendous uptick in the demand from people who are really kind of now, if there is kind of a silver lining on this current sort of situation, is, a lot of people are starting to really see, starting new businesses, new ventures as being self-employed as a legitimate career pathway. I think in the past, it's probably been seen as like, maybe it's because you can't get a job and you're going to, pay yourself a job. We've certainly seen a huge amount of uptick in SSE around people who are kind of have got a tremendous drive to really be able to upskill and move into this space. I think the other element that we're also seeing is more and more people who maybe have a training or a background in a tech field, which is whether it's engineering or trades or whatnot. A lot of them are seeing themselves, their career, not in that same discipline anymore. And so they're really sort of looking at, well, what are the sort of supporting capability and supporting skills and networks that will enable them and give them the optionality around where they can go next. So that's really interesting in terms of the observations that we're seeing through SSE. And as Rob talked about, one of the, I guess, unique positions of SSE is we do have this amazing collaboration with New South Wales universities as well as TAFE, and we get to tap into connections in government, both local and the state level. So we really get to sort of bring these different partnerships together to support really the championing and the growth of innovation thinking as well as entrepreneurial mindset, which is really quite amazing and fascinating to sort of be exposed to that. And part of that, I get to coach founders as well as budding entrepreneurs in their early stage venture building as well. So one examples that I working quite closely with one of the startups, they had started their sort of virtual reality platform to support global tourism. That they kicked that off right in the middle of COVID. And, the founder, we were having a conversation a couple of months ago, and she's kind of said, well, this is probably not the best time to, looking to raise money and build a business. And we kind of worked together to think about, well, given these there's a problem that probably has shifted in terms of the global kind of tourism. There's still a problem in domestic tourism. How could you tap into that? How could you actually support the need to foster and drive domestic tourism? So she's actually now partnering with local and regional businesses, particularly the Airbnb hostess, to actually connect them onto this VR platform they've got to really increase and showcase some of the opportunities and some of the sort of tourist attractions in their local areas. So just one example around how, innovation doesn't have to be sort of next generation, grains or futuristic sort of inventions. It can be also thinking creatively outside the box around what are some of the more immediate problems that can be solved. The only other thing that I'll love to sort of share with you, as Lou talked about. So prior to joining SSE, I got to work inside CSIRO. So it was part of the founding team that started the ON program, which is Australia's National Science Accelerator. And I can see John. Well, yeah, I did see John, who was also one of our great mentors through the program as well. And so have had the opportunity to really work alongside people with deep expertise in a particular discipline. And as Lou talked about, there's a huge kind of hunger and a drive to really see their ideas, see the research they're doing be converted into impact. And you know, there's certainly a desire to sort of reach out with businesses, whether it's small businesses, large businesses, to really explore how they can convert those ideas into innovation. And one of the big things I often talk about is an invention or an idea is great, but that's only probably for, you know, less than 5% of that journey. How do we turn an idea into innovation, which is all about creating value for people? And so that's kind of where some of the experience that I had so far.
Great, thanks Emily. At this point, we'll convert over to being our panel discussion. I'll hand over to Sarah. So welcome, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily. That was really great. Look, I think everyone has an opportunity now to put some questions or ideas in the chat, which we can explore further. And so it makes it a little bit more interactive, but it means that you get what these brilliant minds can impart some direct details to you. I guess for me, what I've been learning from today is, you know, you look for action. What are the challenges that you have, or what's a problem that you can solve? And then what support do you need? And how do you collaborate? Like, I really like the idea of bringing up people that, you know, are coming through the next generation and helping them to collaborate with you on a project that inspires them to move on to their own projects. I think believing is a really good message that came out today. You believe that you can do it. And yeah, I just think that this is just a great format for us to really hear and change the way that we might be thinking about things. Emily, something that you really mentioned, and I really want to investigate a little bit further with you, is innovation isn't technology. You know, a lot of people think that you have to have this great app or a new, you know, program or something to innovate, but it could be as simple as looking at your business model or your market and innovating that way. Do you have other examples that where people have gone from one market to another? Like, obviously you had the travel going from global to domestic and really niching down into the Airbnbs, but is there any other examples throughout this time where you've seen some great innovation and business model changes?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many kind of really creative sort of you know, experiments that are happening, both from, I think, from a startups world, but also in businesses as well. So one, I guess, you know, talking about SSE being in a situation where we are kind of seeing all these universities currently kind of really looking at the context around, you know, that drop in international student numbers, and looking at as an organization, as an institute, how do you innovate and how do you sort of really explore different operating models as well as different business models. And so what we've certainly seen is, even in large institutions, that's been happening, and I'm sure Lou can add to that a lot as well. So I think we've certainly seen examples of large institutes really sort of trying to tackle that as well. Some of the startups that we've seen, another example would be one of the teams that went through, or actually alumni of SSE, who developed the company called Espresso Displays. And so they actually developed a hardware, a piece of laptop screen that can be plugged into any laptop. So they kind of started that venture back in 2017, 18-ish. And obviously, you know, in those days, most people were working in offices, and you know, it was a big challenge of, well, why would you want a portable screen? You know, you just rock up into the office and there's a mega screen in front of you. That's all good. And you know, in the last, obviously, 3 to 6 months, you know, that they've had orders that have just completely gone through the roof. And they originally had a production plan, I believe, for the late sort of second half, or almost end of the year. And obviously with this kind of opportunity, they kind of really ramped up and said, okay, let's take a bet and actually start taking pre-orders. So they've actually jumped onto a crowdsourcing platform and have sold over, I think, 1,000 of these devices on the first kind of round of crowdsourcing. And so, you know, part of that is also a bit of a story around kind of looking at the opportunity and seizing the opportunity and going, we're going to go for it, and we're willing to sort of you know, not necessarily have all the ducks lined up in the row. And this is kind of part of, I guess, some of that startup mentality is, you know, launching sort of, you know, building as you're diving, you know, diving down the cliff of like, you're going to back yourself and, you know, see the opportunity and just go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the tenacity of business owners, is you do have to back yourself and keep going even when times get tough. Lou, I have a question for you. You had mentioned that the survival rate when you collaborate goes from 5% to 78%, if I got that right. I'd love to know more about if someone was on here today and they recognise that collaboration is probably the next step that they might need to take to either brainstorm their pivot or what they're going to do. What would you suggest to them to start doing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because they're the same issues that SMEs are working with as well. But, you know, one of the things that we've noticed is that startups are very lean anyway, like just the way Edwina, you know, shared that story as well. So, you know, everybody's watching their cash. So being lean, knowing what that cash flows, how long that's going to last, but also it's the collaboration. So what we've seen is that we have, so just to give you that quick high level, we have 61 startups working in the SRI across New England Northwest, across agriculture, health, environmental and creative industries. And I love that comment about STEAM, because having creative people in this community. So if you imagine a diverse community, which is what you also have with the chamber, it means that if you actually know who's in your community and you know the capability of people, there's room for sharing. So we have one, you know, somebody who's actually doing it tough at the moment, but somebody else is actually needing a software developer, you know, so that person is now on salary to another startup who's actually in absolute growth mode. So when you create a community, you get that sharing of capability, and we're all kind of riding out a situation at the moment. It will come, you know, it will come good, and it will take us, you know, to spot new opportunities. But if we can actually share in, that's when you get the collaboration. So one of the things is that we have a very kind of clear community rule, is that people actually have to give in 8 hours a month to community as well as taking out. So you actually are required. If somebody phones you and says, "Can you help me? I'm stuck on my web design," then you would expect that somebody would actually give you a hand with that. Or could you introduce me to somebody who could help me to grow? So it absolutely comes down to that fundamental capacity to build relationships, be coachable, be open, and to share resources, because that's I guess coming back to that wellspring, that's how we grow opportunity together.
Thanks, Lou. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I really love that you're each giving back to each other. I think that's a brilliant idea. So, you know, anybody can get started. I know at the Chamber we have groups that get together weekly. You know, how can they help each other? I know they do, but maybe it's thinking about it a little bit differently so that they can build on that and actually help each other thrive. Edwina, I have a good question for you. You had to really pivot from a really obviously face-to-face program that most people would never have imagined could go online. And I love the fact that you went and studied adult learning and how people learn online. And so I guess, you know, you could probably share with us something that we might have face-to-face and believe that we can only do face-to-face. How would we go to making changes to bring it to online communities?
I think, and a lot of this, and probably this will light Emily's fire as well, is testing. Like, you have to test it and see what works and speak to your market. And so what we actually did would we break down all the modules and see what the completion rates were of the modules, and then look at, well, why was that not, for a really good example, early in the piece, we had a module called mental health. Now, I don't know if you actually know this, that's an assumption, but we know as midwives and obstetricians and clinicians that the rate of perinatal mental health, or the experience of perinatal mental health, is on an extreme rise. So it's a really important area, not only for the mother, but also her support person. And So, you know, that's a big part of how I wanted to make sure that that was embedded everywhere in the course. No one would open it. So we dressed it up a little, and it's now prenatal yoga, guided relaxation and meditation. A lot of the same messages are in there, a lot of the same resources. It's about how you build your capacity and resilience and communicate with your partner, reach out and talk to people if you are feeling this way, or this way. So it's all the mental health education, but it was like, well, how do we make this more attractive? And I think the challenge is a lot of people with online education think it's pre-recording something, putting it in a portal, selling it, and then saying, there you go. Now, as adults, we know that if we're not encouraged to keep going back into that education, it's not really a way that they're going to get the most out of. I have also got the huge commercial advantage in that parents want to do their birth education before they actually birth their child. Like, it's not like a weight loss program or a quit smoking program, or, you know, you want to actually do the course. However, we have weekly emails, we do live weekly Q&As, we have a social media closed Facebook group that honestly is such a community. Like, women are craving this at that time. There's a lot of anxiety, and particularly now, they're not going to mothers groups. They're not, you know, able to have that sense of community, but it's something that we've been building and working on building for years. So now that it's there, what's probably not helping us is that there are others that are like, oh, this is how you do online education. You just speak at people. And I think we know as adults, that's not the way that you're going to engage someone. We have videos, we have downloadables, we have Q&As, we have workbooks, because you've got to work to all the different minds and all the different ways that we like to learn and engage. So that's where we did a lot of our kind of research and really invested a lot of our time and energy.
That's fantastic. And I think, yeah, you're right, that community really helps. And I love the timeline. So, you know, if you've got a program, make sure there's timelines there for people to be incentivized to complete. Because I think completion rates on courses that don't have a timeline are quite low. I think it's under 30%. So it's really good for you know, to have that date set. So I guess for us online, you know, what could you set as a timeline for your clients to achieve so that they're getting the service in time? And this is when we're thinking differently. So you might have a service currently that you haven't discovered. And I'd love to hear if anyone can unmute now. Have you got something that you can share or a question for one of our panelists? Emily, do you have a question for maybe Edwina or Lou? I know you've worked closely with them, and I'd love to hear how your take on what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I was just sort of about to jump in before you asked the question to the group. I really just wanted to really build on what Edwina talked about, but something just to tease that out around what she talked about, which is, you know, it's not something that I think sometimes we and again, I think Luke's question around, you know, do people sort of think the idea is the most important element? And for what Edwina talked about, it's also part of the kind of, I guess, pre-work or prep work that has happened in the background before she's able to sort of seize an opportunity and convert that into an online program. Sometimes, a lot of times, the popular culture of kind of, you know, how tech startups kind of emerge is, you know, you kind of do an all-nighter in your garage and a magical app happens, and then, you know, you kind of just sell it overnight. You know, it's kind of, what it really kind of exemplifies what Edwina talked about is you really have to be able to sort of be working in the background and, you know, building the sort of the tool, the services before the opportunity arises. And a lot of times it is, what I often see is sometimes there's lots of kind of I guess innovation or sort of capability that's brewing in the background, and you kind of have to do that work in beforehand. You know, you have to spend the 6 months, 12 months, many years, many times when I work with researchers, 10 years in the making. Like, a lot of these sort of new breakthroughs or companies are often 20 years in the making, but you know, often we kind of do sort of see this as, oh, somebody's got this idea and they just magically turn it around in a day or 2 days per week, and, you know, a company gets grown and you know, away you go. So I think that's something so important to really recognize that, and sometimes the risk, as Amina talked about, particularly with online kind of delivery, is there is this myth around, oh, I've done this, you know, this face-to-face story this way. I'll just kind of patch it up and just send it online. That's done. You know, I've ticked the pivot box, or I've ticked the innovation box. There is, you know, real kind of, I guess, research that has to go behind it, and thinking and work to really build that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that. I think we're all aware of that it takes 20 years to make an overnight success. All of us in this room, it's very evident. Look, a good question came out from Catherine. I think, you know, maybe she's learnt now that about the studying and ways of delivering her product online. But something that I actually come across a lot is the marketing. Like, how do you now, you've got this awesome product, you've tested it, you know, you've had a group of support and collaborators around you to get it off the ground. But how do you get it out there? What kind of things would you suggest someone could do that's just started up an online program, or something that they've diverted their business model to?
Yeah, very happy to jump into this one. It's such a good question, Catherine. And very much we had sat in that space for a while. So, and I'm really conscious that we now have quite a healthy social media ad spend. However, we spent years in the organic space, so not doing paid advertising. One of our biggest ways that we were able to engage people was through self-referral or referrals from others that hadn't, and you know, that's the best way to test a product, who's going to keep using it. So I would say, again, with your marketing strategy, keeping it small and realistic. But at the moment, all the SRI founders were doing a program called Leverage, where we're working with an incredible business coach. And she uses this analogy of kick the can. And it's been even so good for me. And so visually, I see somebody walking along the beach kicking a can, and it's just one kick at a time. Because I think when we come into this space and we're talking about you know, marketing plans and business plans and what's your strategic overview, and I used to just sit there and go, I don't even understand all of this language. I'm public health. But it's helped me to go, okay, what's my objective? And your objective is, are you working with children or adults? Sorry.
I'm working with both, but our main target audience is children. We're creative kids providers, so we're really encouraged to look at 4 to 18-year-olds who are enrolled in school.
Yeah, and good. How awesome is the Creative Kids voucher? I use that with my children. With that, kind of looking at, okay, well, who's like really breaking it down just step by step? What can I do this week? Can I speak to a mother who has used my program, and it's as simple as saying, hey, do you mind if I just grab my phone? What you just said was so kind, and I love that you love our classes, and that's how it's impacting you. Can I film that? And it's pushing yourself out of that comfort zone. It's probably pushing your clients out of their comfort zone as well. But being bold, having those big asks, and then just putting it out there on social media. So I know that that's hugely daunting to a lot of people. You don't need to have a big ad spend. You don't need to have a big plan, but just start testing little things and seeing, oh, well, where do my families who I want to connect with hang out? You know, do I still, you know, look at your different marketing strategies? It doesn't have to be all online. You might be, Catherine, able to make a really quick 5-minute video about how this helps children, I don't know, you know, developmentally, how it helps them in the schoolroom, in the classroom. You know, what is important to your parents? What do your parents tell you are the benefits? And make a little clip and put it out there and see then it comes down to that test and measure. See where people really engage with you. And I think it's about not feeling overwhelmed, but just writing out a list of 5 things and ticking it off. Getting an accountability buddy, I'm a huge fan of that. I think as the chamber, if you are, you know, able to segment yourselves into different areas where you're going, oh, you know, that's really interesting, Catherine, that's something that I'm looking at as well. And so, you know, make a little buddy group and hold each other accountable to it. That's what we've been able to do with our Leverage business group as well. We meet weekly so that you can go, oh, did you do it? You know, like, it's like weight loss or going to the gym, anything. We know that if you have somebody who's going to be able to check in with you and hold you accountable, then you're more likely to do it. But happy to talk to you after this as well, Catherine, just reach out.
Yeah. Thanks, Edwina. Look, I guess, yeah, we all have to kind of start looking at how do we use social selling, and your market, Catherine, is a real big opportunity, and sometimes it is just getting outside your comfort zone and just biting that bullet and doing that first video, or asking your clients to jump on a video for you.
Yeah,
Louis,
jump in and share a quick story. So
thanks,
one of the founders that I've just coached recently had a really similar sort of question around, well, you know, she's also working with kind of small businesses, and you know, she was thinking about actually sort of creating or putting some vouchers on her platform as a way to really encourage so the use of the platform. And she was the biggest hurdle was like, what if they say no? And I kind of asked her, well, hang on, but you're offering them to have another platform to sort of reach their audience, reach their customers. Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? And she's like, oh, no. Well, the worst thing is they just say no. And you know, I think sometimes it's just that mindset of like, there's no harm in asking the question. The worst thing is they just say actually it's not for me. And what we ended up doing is we actually sort of built sort of like a sprint sheet, so that every single week she would at least go and ask 5 new small business owners to say, hey, would you be willing for me to put you on my platform and you know, showcase you and you know, offer a coupon or a voucher. But I think there's an element around starting, but also giving yourself kind of that goal of, you know, doing like 5 or 10, because sometimes you kind of, once you get into the rhythm, the hardest part is just starting, and then giving yourself the opportunity just to build a bit of a habit, because often you'll experience the value of that, and then it kind of turns into a bit of a self-motivating cycle.
Yeah. And I guess that's where that accountability buddy or partner can come in handy. We did have a question, and I guess as business owners, often, especially if you're bootstrapping startup, you wear a lot of hats. And, you know, we had the question around, can you learn the other skills that you need to? And I thought maybe around the collaboration, Lou, this is probably a perfect question for you, is do we need to learn all these skills, or do we need to maybe collaborate a little bit more on those?
Look, I think it is that openness to learning. One of the things, like just listening to Edwina and Emily, is what are the questions we need to ask? How do we ask customers those questions without, you know, because sometimes we get very attached to our solution to the problem and how we see it, but that testing it with people. So like, I think there is absolutely value in gathering and thinking, brainstorming, what are the questions we would ask our customers? And that's the work that Emily's been doing as well, as part of some human-centered design thinking that we've been delivering. And it's kind of core to what we do in our innovation and entrepreneurship programs, as well as what SSE is delivering, is that how do we talk to people? How do we actually have open-ended questions? So not presume people's needs and wants, and really drill down into the why is this a problem? Emily might like to say more about that, but we'd have to say absolutely. This is a great place for learning that whole kind of creativity and innovation piece, and having some tools. There are some great tools that can help us to do that really quickly, because this is a kind of a fast to market, fast and test, and be authentic in that process. Emily, do you want to talk about some of that work that you've been doing about how to talk to customers?
Yeah, happy to. Or maybe one of the examples. So as Lou talked to us, so we're running a series in partnership with UNA and Exchange over in Dubbo to deliver human-centered design workshops to public servants across New South Wales. If there's one place that you're thinking, how are they going to adopt and utilize this? You know, we've been working with Department of Primary Industries, sort of regional New South Wales, and you know, who are sort of often officers who are kind of design or are in charge of developing policies, you know, who are in charge of coming up with new rules around how we should work. And we've been kind of taking them through tools and processes around creativity, around thinking about the customer. And I can definitely tell you there's lots and lots of light bulb moments for them to go, I get it now. I see why I have to actually go out and understand who my customers are and why this is an issue, and what's actually happening in their world, on their farm. And I think that's you know, probably the best kind of evidence, if you will, around you can sort of introduce these tools, skill sets for people to take on. Now, you know, again, there's always sort of the I guess caveat around, you can create the space for them to learn, but it's absolutely up to them to pick it up and apply it in their context. And I think this is also part of the importance of thinking about the learning design, not just what happens in the classroom or not just when you've got their attention, is also, you know, how can you prepare them to actually then apply those tools, those new skills into their work, into their context.
Doesn't that make you want to learn with Emily? Hey, can I just... Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, sorry, but we're just at that witching hour where we might sort of wrap everything up. So I'd really like to, you know, thank the speakers today. There were some really interesting themes coming across. So incentivise to finish. So I don't think there's a bigger incentive than the one that Edwina was covering. You know, often my incentive is purely just a cup of coffee, but yeah, definitely having a child is on time is a big incentive to do the course. The other is around optimism. So it's really important, you know, that the people have an optimistic frame of mind. I think that's come across quite clearly to help them succeed. Innovation across the spectrum. So we're seeing that from very small businesses to very large corporations, and collaboration, you know, to improve your success rate dramatically. How many people thought that? You know, often they are very possessive about their idea and their intellectual property and don't want to share, but their chance of success is really minimal unless they can collaborate. And community, the sharing of capability is so important, you know, to grow that opportunity together. So, and testing with customers. People often forget that. They're so wrapped up in their little idea that they forget the big customer. You know, if there's no customer for their idea, it's not going to happen. So thank you all. So thank you, Edwina, Emily and Lou. And now I'm calling on Luke McGee. He's the Vice President of the Chamber, and he's just going to do a quick update on the upcoming Chamber events. So thank you. Over to you, Luke.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks, Sarah, for today, and thanks to all the speakers. It was excellent. Just the Chamber, the Parramatta Chamber, really appreciate the relationship that we have with UNE. So it's very, very critical to the way we see ourselves going forward as well. So thanks again. In terms of Chamber events, we did have a little attempt to have a face-to-face where we planned it for next month, but we've had to cancel that because of you know, the new issues in Western Sydney. So we've pulled back from that event, but we're still hoping to run the Wasabi events, which are scheduled for the end of October. And there will be a Parramatta State of the City event, which we have decided will be a virtual event towards the end of October. So they're the big things coming up at the moment. And I think there's another session next week. We've established a program we call Live It Live, where we have some speakers from the Chamber who share some of their ideas. So there's an event on that next week. So please get on the distribution list for the Parramatta Chamber and you'll get emails with all the upcoming events. So thanks again for everybody for today. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, Lou. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Edwina.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye.